Hi everyone! Today we're going to be making this cute little gnome out of clay. Today in your kit you're going to have a few different things you're working with. We have a big hunk here that you're going to use first, a smaller hunk of clay. You have this little styrofoam plate to work on, and you have this little toothpick that we're going to be using for some different things, and you'll just need some water in a cup. But to get started, you're going to take your big hunk of clay, and we're going to use our thumbs to make like a little cone shape for our hat and the face of our gnome. So to do that, you'll just take your thumb and press down the middle, and then you're going to set your piece on top of your thumb and start to squeeze the clay. And you want it to look like a cone, so you're going to squeeze it so it's a little thinner at the top and thicker at the bottom. So if you kind of just focus on this shape here that you see, not so much the face and that stuff yet, but just squeeze it around your thumb. It's going to make a little hollow space on the inside. And you can bring your hat up to a point. And then once you have this basic cone shape here, you can take your fingers and start to widen the bottom. If you just take your thumb in here and pinch it like this, just to thin out your sides a little bit. And then remember the top, if you want to have a cute little curl at the top, you can just pinch it and roll it over. But your main goal is to have the thickness of like an Oreo cookie, something like that. You don't want it too thick, your clay will take a long time to dry. So just thin that out a little bit at the bottom, while making sure you keep that hollow space on the inside. And then once you've done that, if you just tap it on the table, then you'll get a flat space here so that your gnome will sit nice and straight. So then from there, you have your small hunk of clay, which you can pick that up, and you're going to be using this for two different things. So just take most of that piece, just break it. You could do it in half, or kind of depending on how big you want your nose to be, but one half is going to be your nose and the other half is just going to be used for the decoration on your hat. So for the little band on your hat, you're going to roll your clay into a snake. You're probably going to use your bigger hunk of clay for the little brim on your hat, and then the smaller piece for your nose. So just set your nose off to the side. Start to roll that snake. If you want to use the table in front of you, you can. If you start to get some little cracks in your clay, if it starts to feel dry, that's when you can use your water. Just dip your finger in the water and smooth those out. Clay likes to be moist, so it's nice to give it some water when it dries up some. It gets kind of hard to work with if it gets too dry, so just keep that in mind. But just little bits of water is good. You don't want to drench it or anything. So for the brim, if you just want to use the round snake, you can use that. Or if you want to do like I did on this guy, I just took my my snake and I laid it on the table, and then I took this part of my hand and just patted it down to flatten it out a little bit, just to make it look a little bit thicker. Okay. So then you have a piece more like this. And that's what we're going to use to separate the beard here from the rest of our hat. So to do that, this is very, very important. Anytime you want to attach clay to another piece of clay, you have to score it first. So that's when your toothpick comes in handy. So you want to take your toothpick and grab your little brim of your hat, and you want to roughen this up. So I just like to do quick little jabs in here just to roughen the hat up. You can go all the way across. And then you also want to score the place you're going to be attaching the brim. So to do that, I like to kind of lay it on there first just to get an idea of where I have to score. So if you take this, and it's going to kind of curl like this, like make a little arch. So if you lay it on there first, and then you can take your toothpick and just lightly draw a line across here along the bottom and the top. And then you can see where you need to score on your clay here. So if you just take your piece away and score between those lines you just created. The scoring is so important because when we go to fire your piece, if it's not scored, it's just gonna pop right off. So it's really important to have it roughened up so that the clay has something to grab onto and it's not gonna pop off when it's being fired. So now that you have this area scored and this area scored on your gnome, you wanna take a little bit of water on your finger. You can just dab some on there. It just helps it to stick a little bit better. You don't want to rub your finger on there or it's going to smooth out all the little, like all the roughing you just did. So just tap it on there and then lay it on the area that you scored on your gnome. And you're just going to press down with your finger, follow that line. And then you're most likely going to have some extra, so if that happens, you can just break that off with your fingers because you don't need that. So just pat that down and make sure it's nice and smooth. Any areas that you scored that you can still see, if you want to smooth those out with your finger and some water, you can. But as long as it's scored nicely, your pieces shouldn't come off. So just make sure you don't skip that step. Okay, so now we have a beard here and then the rest of our hat. So for the beard, we're just gonna texture it. We're also gonna use our toothpick. So to do that, I just like to hold it in my hand and I just stick it in there and make quick little lines in there. Kind of just like before when you were scoring the brim of your hat. It's kind of the same thing. You just want to go straight down like this. And you're just going to do this whole area below the piece that you just attached. So then once you've filled that, it looks like a beard. And then if you want to do some more to your hat up top, you can kind of squeeze that in different areas to make it kind of more rough looking, like a gnome's hat. Give it some more shape. So just use your fingers and kind of pinch it and move it. Make it kind of wavy looking if you want to, or you can just keep it straight up, however you like, but this is kind of fun to make it your own. And then another thing you'll do, take the little hunk of clay that was left, and that's going to be for your nose here. So just take it in your hands and roll it up into a ball. And then I like to take my nose and just tap it a few times on the table So it's going to give you one flat side, and that side is where you're going to be attaching. So you want to remember to score, so pick up your toothpick again and score that flat side you just made from tapping it on the table. And then you shouldn't have to score here because you already have all those little marks in there from making your beard. So just tap some water on there, and you're going to attach this right below the brim of your hat. So just stick it right on there. You don't have to use the whole hunk if you don't want to. You can make it smaller. My gnome's nose is kind of big, so you can take some clay out if you don't want it that big, but just tap it and make sure it's stuck on there. And then if you want to do some more decorating to your hat, something that's really fun, if you go outside and you pick up a rock that has some good ridges and texture on it, you can take your rock, and if you just tap it onto your clay, it makes some really cool ridges. Gives it some interesting texture, which will be really cool when you come to paint your gnome, because then your paint will highlight those and make it really fun looking. So I like to take it along the brim of my hat sometimes. So anything you have that'll add some fun texture, feel free to do that. Just kind of tap it on there and it'll give you something like that. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna let your gnome dry. You can bring it back into the studio, and then we're gonna wait a couple weeks and then we'll fire it. So just bring it back at your convenience whenever you can, once you finish your gnome, and then once it's dry, we're gonna fire it for you. And then about 2 weeks after that, after you've brought it back in, yeah, a couple weeks after you brought it back in, you can come back into the studio and we're gonna fire it, or you can come in and paint it. So that's all there. I hope that all was helpful to you. So have fun making your little gnomes.